So this is the Logitech BRIO in 4K with just a little bit of cloudy ambient light coming through a window. I think the colors are a little better and obviously the quality is so much sharper. But, you know, the low light has been increased, but there's some kind of trade-offs. So we're going to see what this wider field of view from the BRIO in 4K is like versus the Logitech C920, which used to be the king and is still an okay option versus most built-in webcams. So here's the 1080p C920 footage, how it looks compared to this in 4K. So here is the C920 1080p. It's actually upscaled to 4K. I've tweaked some of the settings, all manual exposure, and again, the same cloudy background light coming from the window. So even with the saturation increased a little bit, it starts to get kind of unnatural. And it's got a softer look, but it's still pretty decent. But now we're gonna really dive into some details on the differences between these two webcams. So here's a side-by-side of the two cameras. Now the 4K BRIO has a little bit of a delay, which personally I don't like because it's not as instant when you're looking at the screen. And I mean, if you know a fix, leave a comment and tell me, but this is the best I could do. On the BRIO, I zoomed in just a little bit to try to get an equal frame because the BRIO does have a wider field of view. And yeah, so you gotta zoom in. It shouldn't affect the 4K that much, but here's the motion between the two. I think the C920, this one here, is just a little bit smoother. It's 30 frames a second for both of them, all manual, and the exposure is decent. So I don't know what's affecting the jerkiness. I mean, my computer is definitely fast enough. I got an NVIDIA 1080 and a overclocked CPU, all of that. So yeah, everything's pretty good. But now we're gonna look at some of the settings, and we're going to do a display capture. And we should see the two different webcams. I don't know if we will be able to do it side by side. No. All right, we're gonna start with the C920. Configure the video. Now we have this and the saturation's at 200%. And if we increase it, it looks like the saturation has been like really artificially cranked up, as you can see. Softer look, decent motion. So I even keep that at 200 and it still kind of has a dull look. Auto white balance on the C920. The bar is not moving, so I personally don't know what it is, but again, okay white balance, and I can turn it off. And you see the slider and you know it gets a little bluer. So that has kind of a more natural manual white balance. And then the exposure, personally, if you just put it at 4, yeah, horrible. 5, a little bit of motion blur so it's smooth. Put it at 6 and you're starting to get some of that like high speed choppiness, and I mean, yeah. So I just keep it at 5 because it's 30 frames a second. You got a little bit of a natural blur. And there's that. So now if we look at the BRIO, the thing is it's got HDR. And that really does some weird stuff to the light. So I'm gonna show you guys what it looks like that I have to keep it on auto for the white balance, because if I turn it off, you see that, and I'm like, okay. First of all, I had it at 5,000 for my last white balance, so why is it doing this? On the BRIO, I wish you could import the same color settings over, but apparently you can't. So I don't know why the colors are like this, and you know, obviously it's gonna go blue if I do it that way. All manual. And then it gets kind of purple, and then obviously more red and orange. So I'm like, okay, if I put it here, this is like a okay skin tone, but there's too much red. And then even when I've done auto, like at night, see, it added like a slightly green filter tint, which I'm assuming would be the hue, as you can see, like right there, but it's grayed out. I've tried to look up how can you enable and change the hue, because when you do manual white balance, you need to be able to adjust the hue, but as soon as you hit auto, it'll change the color temperature, and then it also will adjust the hue, but you can't touch that. So I don't know what's going on with that. The hue is what is really messing up the BRIO for some reason. Gain does pretty well. It doesn't really blow too much out, especially like when you're streaming though. The noise in the background isn't really that bad. So let's just put this on like 150. And the exposure, again, you know, if you put it on 4, it's choppy. 5, nice motion blur. This starts to get kind of that high shutter speed, and then, I mean, obviously, yeah, that. So technically, I think to get the best image quality, you would put exposure just at 5 because it's gonna, you know, be smooth and everything. And you would ideally want to have more light and be able to take the gain down, because the gain's gonna have a bunch of issues with the grain. But so far, it's not that bad. Brightness is just kind of like whatever, or the contrast. See, my saturation's a lot lower with the BRIO. It was at 200% on the C920, and here it's close to like 150, and it still has more natural colors. Obviously, if I put it at 100, it's pretty dulled out. Now, if I put it at 200, I'm gonna look crazy. So there's more color capabilities on the BRIO, which I do like, and the backlight comp doesn't really do anything on the BRIO, so I don't know if it's always enabled or what. And low light, I haven't really noticed much of that, but say I'm gonna hit exposure for auto, it's going to adjust just the gain and the exposure on the other page, because yeah, see how now I can't really do anything, but I just leave it at manual, keep it at 5, adjust the gain. So other people that you see with these examples for the BRIO are like completely, I don't know, they're just kind of whack. Like they have the BRIO like really choppy. The colors are messed up. Like it's like they purposely trying to make it look bad, but I think it looks really good. The field of view is just, you got to adjust it a little bit, and the white balance is the only issue I kind of have some things with, but you can definitely see a huge increase in the sharpness. It's 4K. There's more future-proof issues, like benefits. Wish the motion was not as jerky, like it's just smoother on the old one, but I think the colors and the HDR is a little bit better. And then again, there's 1080p at 60 frames a second, which is decent. So hopefully they didn't like nuke the 30 frames per second smoothness on it to try to make the 60 look better. Maybe it's not even a true 60. But I think the BRIO is definitely worth the quality that they have, because it's definitely sharper. You know, it would be nice if they kept like the same color profiles and all of that, but it's definitely a big difference, and people always try to say they can't see the difference between the 4K and the 1080p, but it's definitely there. And if you got fast enough internet and a good computer, you might as well, because you're future-proofing yourself. But yeah, this is my little example of the Logitech BRIO in 4K, and other people on YouTube, it just seems like they don't know how to do it. They have like a giant light behind them, like no light in front of them, weird lights all over the place. They're recording at a really low bit rate. They have everything on auto, and then they're trying to bash it and all of that. So I don't know what's up with that. Personally, I think this BRIO looks pretty good, and it does a decent job. And it also has the 3D Hello facial recognition for logging in, so you can literally just look at the camera and it logs in the computer. Bit creepy. That's a decision you need to make, but yeah, I got this on sale at Best Buy for $160, and I would still maybe say it's worth $200 if you don't have a webcam at all.